I think the big thing comes down to authenticity. I think any brand content that is created needs to feel like it's authentic.
This is Velocitize Talks, and I'm Eric Jones. I'm here with Alistair Bryan, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Momentum Worldwide. Alistair, it's great to have you.
Thank you very much.
Tell us a little bit about Momentum Worldwide. You describe yourselves as being, the best brand experience agency in the world. Tell us why that's so important today.
I think we've got a driving philosophy around it's not what brands say, but it's what they do that makes a real difference. And so I think experience has become more and more important within the sort of modern marketing mix, because I think the way that a brand behaves is what gives it credibility. And so we've built a very successful business around that very simple mantra.
Why do you think that's so? It seemingly has become even more important today. This whole notion of a brand's purpose, right, and sort of what they stand for. Why, we see millennials and even more so Gen Z, that matters even more for them. Why do you think it's suddenly risen so much to the fore?
I think it probably comes down to simple sort of human sort of quality around trust. The relationships that consumers have with brands, I think, becomes more and more important. And they want a brand that speaks to what their values are, and therefore they need to trust that brand and what it sort of represents, because it's as much a definition of who they are.
Yeah, it's almost like brands today have to be more human.
Yes. Yeah, and I think really at the heart of how we start to sort of plan things is about that. And I know it's an often used sort of mantra of people about putting the consumer in the center of it. But I mean, understanding the consumer and the interactions that they need to have around a particular experience is absolutely fundamental.
How has the creation of that brand experience evolved, over your career, in the agency world?
I think the way that it's actually changed is that technology has enabled it to be amplified further than just the base kind of experience itself. If you take some of the work that we do for American Express, we will cover thousands of people who come into the US Open and who have a chance to interact one-on-one with a particular kind of digital or creative technology experience that we've created. But far outweighing that is the reach of what happens after that. And the amplification of the sort of experience from peer to peer.
Would you highlight any other brands that sort of are nailing this whole concept of omni-channel and sort of seamlessly going from physical events, let's say the US Open, all the way on through to various digital touch points and sort of, mapping that customer journey perfectly?
Yeah, I mean, I would also talk about Microsoft as one of our clients. And I mean, some of the work that we do for them is again about dramatizing products which are, very functional in what they're delivering, cloud-based products and partnerships that they have. But what they're able to do is explain the technology in an approachable manner to decision makers, but then also follow that through activity of understanding who then in the purchase cycle we're able to look at to convince them about the products that are there.
It seems like more and more brands, in a world where, technology is increasingly commoditized, anybody can have it. Startups, have the best technology in the world, same as, large established brands. It seems like more and more brands are actually thinking about competing on the basis of that customer experience. Are you seeing that in your business, and sort of what are the opportunities for Momentum in that context?
Yeah, I mean, I think, customer experience, I suppose, is what we've done, and technology plays a huge role in that now. And I think, how that technology plays out within the experiences that we create is the really important thing. It's not technology for technology's sake. It needs to enhance the experience to actually be brand relevant as well. And I think what we're finding more and more is actually, it gets into this sort of entertainment of mixed reality to take people along a journey.
Do you think there's been any type of a setback or chill cast because of the increasing regulatory environment with GDPR, or do you think actually, in fact, ultimately, we'll see more creativity and more innovation long term because of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for GDPR, we went through a very thorough process as an agency network and as a group of agencies. I think the impact on what that means in terms of the data, in terms of how it's collected in individual events and how that's then processed and used. The regulatory part of it is now established, but I think the long-term opportunity of that, of people actually understanding that the data is being used, the ways that it's being used, will only go to sort of serve to actually increase kind of better marketing communications and kind of experiences that we can do.
I wanted to talk a little bit about branded content. So, with the decline of the earned media world, a lot of the void is being filled by branded content, right? Sort of owned content that the the brands themselves are creating. Much of it very, very good, actually. What are some of the the things that you recommend for your brands when sort of wading into this world?
I think the big thing comes down to authenticity. I think any brand content that is created needs to feel like it's authentic. I mean, back to the kind of original question you were asking about trust around brands. I think if they're authentic and they are creating things that are needed by consumers and relevant and interesting, that is when they get traction. When they are doing things that feel a little bit like Dad at the Disco moments and they stick out like a sore thumb, that's when it falls flat. And I honestly feel that a lot of the stuff that's content, whether that's influencer based or whether that is actually from the groundswell up from consumers, it can get incredible traction through the sort of activities that are done. But it does come from a very simple place, which is it needs to be authentic. Mm-hmm.
I've seen some studies that suggest folks like Gen Z, that generation, when they go online, they're sort of looking to be entertained first rather than informed.
Yeah.
Which seems to be, a clear generational divide versus, prior generations. When you're creating brand experiences for that particular demographic, how do they differ from, what you might do if you're targeting millennials?
It all needs to feel emotive, and so I think that's the starting point, which is how do we change people's perceptions, their emotions about a particular brand. I think the brilliance of the arena that we play in is actually by its very nature, it demands interaction and experience to happen. And those experiences will change. So with the younger demographics, there is far more entertainment, far more kind of social share opportunities on it and moments for fame for them. Mm-hmm. For slightly older and more traditional business people, there will be far more kind of information feeds and ways to do it. But all of it, for the most part, built around a consumer insight. So not rocket science, but actually understanding the consumer, but then deploying kind of real specialism against that for the individuals who can build a proper experience around those people.
Do you think because most of Gen Z is in fact not in the workforce, that ultimately we might see a shift in that they'll care less about entertainment, as they sort of move through their careers?
I don't know. It probably does. Life stages, probably from your own perspective and my own, what was entertaining many years ago versus now are quite different. I think there's always a moment for entertainment in the things that we do. And I think there should be a moment of sort of levity to engage people with brands at right moments. So whether you are trying to get something across about a very dry product, but do it in an informative and entertaining way, I think we should look at every part of the stuff that we do as being, an engagement piece, an interaction that should be entertaining.
Yeah, I think it works exceptionally well when it's sort of unexpected and spontaneous, but then starts to get creepy when you start to badger everybody with it.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that that is both the fun of what we do at Momentum, which is we have one chance to get it right for the most part. So a consumer interacts with us. It's a live moment, to take them from feeling one thing here to another thing over here. But it's frightening, but equally, the reward of it even is fantastic.
From a technology perspective, what area are you most excited about?
I think mixed reality, really. Taking people on a journey of different experiences is brilliant. We recently did some work for American Express where we literally powered people up from one end of this sort of experience to the other, but it was using a whole set of kind of sensory and mixed reality interactions that happened. And I think the developments that you're starting to see within hyper VR, hyper reality, with things like the Void, it's just incredible what will be able to be done, I think, on a mass version.
With VR, this entire paradigm gets shifted on its head, where these experiences are going to seem so real that you're going to have to suspend belief. You're in the middle of a game, Call of Duty, and suddenly it's going to feel so real that you're going to have to remind yourself, oh my gosh, this is not real.
I think the other thing that VR allows you to do is not even just the escapism, it's actually to tell a really compelling story. So if I think about the work that we did for Merck, who are a pharmaceutical company that we're lucky enough to work with, we created something called the Merck House. The usual way of doing any pharmaceutical sort of activity is you cram a load of people into a room and you give them a conference and you kind of take them through it. What we wanted to do was sort of flip that paradigm and use mixed reality so that healthcare professionals could actually put themselves in the shoes of sufferers. So we used a whole host of things from, electrical plates which we put people's hands onto, which would make them tingle and numb them. We'd get them to pick up objects which were heavier than they would anticipate. They'd have to interact through both VR and various other things that were happening, and it gave them a really true experience about what it was. So yes, back to your point, it allowed them to take them out of the reality, but what it did do was tell a really compelling story at the end of it.
Yeah, it's actually that brings up I think a really interesting point, how technology is increasingly not just purely functional, but in fact creating these vehicles for emotion, these vehicles for empathy. For, again, going back to the generational thing, for Gen Z, that's incredibly important, right? They don't see their sort of mobile phone as a device for, phoning somebody or things like that. It's actually a connection point with, the people that they love the most in the world.
Yes, no, I totally agree. And it comes back to a truism about all the marketing, which is, most people's decisions are made, with their heart, and they use the rational reasons then to sort of back it up at the end of it. And I think the people, and when we do it well, is when we are able to kind of pull on their emotional strengths to help them make the rational decisions after that. And that, there's an array of different techniques and activity that we do to do that.
We were told never to accept your Tom Collins challenge.
I'm not sure where this came from. It could have come from anyone.
What is that exactly?
There is a certain place in Soho which is a sort of quite a dive bar. I worked always on the philosophy that the way that you should bring up a team is to be more. If you remember Aesop's fable of the sun and the north wind, I was much more around the sun side of it than I was about castigating people. But we used to do a regular trip to this place in Soho, and they used to do teapots of Tom Collins. And I think that's maybe where you might have heard that from. But I thought I'd kept that one quite quiet, but obviously not.
We love asking for a book recommendation that you'd have for our viewers.
Yeah. There were a couple, actually. I wrote them down as I was coming, but I think the one that I feel is as relevant now as it was when it was first written, it's just been updated, is James Herman, The Case for Creativity. I think I've seen in the industry, and we've been, when you have moments of bravery around creative, there is a commercial impact. It's inextricably linked, and if you look at some of the work that James has done in his book, The people who get the most rewards for creativity, you look at the effectiveness of their work and it's 2 times more effective, and therefore the relationships that they have with their clients are far more effective. And then I think the second book that I read many years ago was Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers. And that is about not worrying about making the mistakes. It's about trying it. And those paths that have been the least travelled are probably usually the best ones to go. So if it frightens you, do it.
That's awesome, Alistair. Thanks so much for being
Thank
here.
you.
That was Alistair Bryan, the Chief Operating Officer from Momentum Worldwide.